Right, we're here at Aberdare Park today, pre-race day, to give you a rough guide of the 50cc Racers Guide to Aberdare Park race circuit. And to help you will be Ian Cowley, this man here, who's going to give you a rough guide, as a veteran of the park, to what happens at the park. And we're at the paddock gate now.
Right, on leaving the paddock gate, you will head down towards the holding area. The holding area is a nice steep ramp down. You've got to watch your brakes as you go. It's very easy to lock your wheels, but we'll head down to the holding area and pick up again once we get to the track. Right, we're now entering the holding area. As you can see by the bandstand, Aberdare Park's a very picturesque place, probably one of the most picturesque circuits that we race at. You will come down and in a moment you will see the gate. On a race day, because this is pre-race day, there will be a barrier across and the bikes will be stopping here. On a sunny day, which it's not today, many of the riders prefer to get on the left hand side to get some shade from the trees, because you can be held for some time at this point. As we look to the left, you will see the only tight right-hand corner on the circuit. The riders will come through here. It's the slowest part of the circuit, hugging the inside line, and then as you go round, you will see behind the straw bales there is a pond. We've never yet seen anybody end up in the pond, but I'm sure it's happened over the years, and we will now start to head onto the circuit. As you can see, there's very little room for error at this point. The straw bales have been used once or twice by riders, but on a 50cc bike, having left the previous right hand corner, as I was told by J. Bellis Smith, who rode a 50, the first year I was doing it, and I didn't believe him, he said you only brake once on this circuit on a 50, and that is for the downward right hand bend before the lake. From this point you're heading through trees to the right. You don't see them when you're racing, but you have to keep the small bikes pinned going through here, but probably not the first year that you race. So it is, as you're heading now, it's uphill, and you do notice it on the 50, into a blind left-hander. The trick is to move out to the far right hand side of the circuit and then start to peel off a few yards after the telegraph pole. At that point you will see start to see the straw bales at the back of the cafe. As we can see the duck pond and the cafe, we're now standing on the far right hand side of the circuit, on the racing line as you come through. Now it's difficult for some of us to judge as we're walking the circuit, but it is about this point that you peel off into the left hand turn. Obviously you can't see the exit, but the way I take it is I tend to aim for the bushes, and normally, you know, race day there are straw bales round the inside. The trick at this point is once you've peeled off and hit the apex, try and keep tight to the apex, because as you will see, as the straw bales, some of the camber, it's a little bit uneven and you enter an area of adverse camber. You don't want to be over on that, but you do want to, and there goes the sound system car, not quite on racing line. As you then leave the centre part of those straw bales, you can see a tree that's heavily baled on the right hand side. You aim for that, and there is another slight right hand bend. We're now walking on the racing line, starting to head towards the slight right-hander before we enter the start-finish straight. We'll continue to walk on the race line and aim for the tip of the grass on the right-hand side of the circuit. There is a bit of an undulation here on the right, and from memory, and I have to check it in a moment, there's a drain cover that you do want to miss. You can then see the fast straw bale, singular, on the right hand side that would normally be about the point you want to clip before peeling off on the left-hander into the start-finish straight. Now, even on a 50, you've got to really pay a lot of concentration onto the start-finish straight. Several of the club members have ended up in these straw bales or just missing them and doing an excursion onto the grass at this point. So I normally tend to play this one safe, and from here head across towards the apex of the bend with the grass, and then hug it as tight as you can, allowing for the speed that you've gained going down the hill. Right, we're now standing on the racing line that we would try and hug fairly tightly. The penalties for going over the centre of the road as you go towards the trees and the bumpy surface are not worth taking. So we will now continue on the racing line, and we're entering the start-finish straight. The start-finish straight is notably uphill, and most of the 50cc bikes, apart from the most powerful, will lose quite a bit of their speed going up the hill, which is normally taken in top gear until the bike starts to slow, at which time I normally just cog it down once on entering the next bend. Where the start-finish straight is obviously the starting point of the race, and we will be slowly coming up here on the warm-up lap, finding our grid positions, and then unusually for a circuit in these days, the start is done by the Welsh flag, being a Welsh meeting. We don't now see many races started using flags, but in the days when I used to race, that was the standard way. This is a view from number 3 position on the straight. We've got a few vehicles here setting up, but this is the view that you would be looking at while you're waiting for the flag to drop. At this point, the flag drops, clutch away, paddle, 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 because it is an uphill and gearing's fairly high for this. We look for an average speed of around 60 miles an hour on the circuit, and we're going to head off up now towards what they call the rosaries, which is the first bend on the circuit. We're now coming to the point where we're cresting the rise on the start-finish straight. you can notice just in front of us there's quite a bump there. Now some of the larger capacity bikes are struggling to hold their wheels down because they're getting close to the corner and starting to brake. On a 50 that definitely doesn't happen, but it's about this point where you notice the revs have dropped considerably, and although still holding the throttle wide open going into the corner, we normally find that because the next part of the circuit is also uphill, we need to change down, which will lose any excess speed if you're lucky enough to have gained it. Right, we're looking back along the start-finish straight now, but as you can see how close the circuit is to the main road in Trekinnon. Don't know if I pronounced that right because I'm not Welsh, but a lot of people have tried to hop the fence here to get a free spectator's position. What they don't realise is they're the wrong side of the circuit and very quickly picked up and unceremoniously ejected from the circuit. We're now going to carry on walking, and it's a slow walk up, but we're heading into the bend called the Rosaries. Now this for me is, on the first lap, a fairly hectic corner. You've got the quick starters, and also some of the faster bikes that start slower are trying to gain positions at this point. When I first started riding the circuit in 2012, I used to brake for this corner. Fortunately, I've managed to learn it a little bit better, but it's not a circuit that you want to try flat out on the first occasion. More than a couple of our club members have come to grief on this circuit, and Nick and Lynn Tolhurst, who are responsible for this video, have ended up being the ambulance car on certain occasions. Now, as we're entering the bend called the Rosaries, for those of you who are looking away from the tarmac, you might see the reason why it's called the Rosaries, and I've often thought that it may not be too pleasant to end up coming off on this bend into the rose bushes. However, there's a row of straw bales that definitely the first couple of years I rode here were not in position. They're ones not to get too close to, because immediately behind them is a curb, and they've been put there to protect the riders, if they do fall off on this corner, from hitting a sharp curb. You're now starting to see the circuit for a moment dip downhill, and then we will start going up again. Again, on the 50cc bikes, you've got to be flat out at this point, because you will find that the hill will slow you down considerably as you start to go up it. Immediately from here, there's a left-hander that's fairly shallow as you start to crest up the rise. On this one, I tend to try and stay on the inside of the circuit to shorten the distance after we've exited the Rosaries, because it's the shortest possible route and helps with the speed. There's no need whatsoever to start drifting across as you normally would apex the bend, unless you're on a 50 a lot quicker than mine. Right, we're now on the back part of the circuit heading up the hill, and as I said before, the line to this corner on a 50 is stay tight. For the bigger bikes, this corner would be noticeable and quite a corner to take, because you've got a relatively low speed for a 600 compared with some of the faster circuits like Thruxton, Brands Hatch, Snetterton, Silverstone. So the bikes are quite well geared down, and Nick mentioned to me that he does a lot more spectating at this point, because as the bigger bikes come up this bit, they tend to be pulling wheelies and doing a bit of showboating. It's also a good point on the 50 that if you do want to look at the spectators, this is probably the only point that you can do it. And because you've slowed considerably going up here, you do become aware of the spectators on the left hand side of the track. We've now started to get to the highest point on the circuit, and we're going to get on the racing line on the 50s well over to the right hand side of the track. It can't be seen from quite at this point, but there is a fairly sharp left hand bend coming up, but it's still important to approach this very quickly. As you start to go over to the left hand side of the circuit in a moment, you can see the straw bales on the circuit. A lot of the quicker riders are starting to clip the grass on the inside of the bend with their knees. I know several of the club members, Kerry Burton's one who seems to enjoy doing this, but there again, Kerry has been for some excursions through the trees on his larger capacity bike. We're now getting ready and almost on racing line to look at going down into the left-hander. Now this bend is probably the bend that to me is the most frightening on the circuit, because you've got to keep the bike fairly quick, and as you're heading down to where we started this, the right-hand bend going down into the lake. So again, speed kept up going through this left-hander. The hill that we've just come up will have slowed the bike somewhat anyway, so it's not quite as scary as it seems. We're just going to move over to the caravans and vans. Waiting, as Nick just mentioned, where the van is turning around and going back up to the paddock is where you will exit the circuit at the end of the race, or should you retire on the lap. You will also see going down into the circuit now the straw bales to the trees, and it's worth mentioning that although a lot of spectators think that riders are going to end up off everywhere and this is why they pad the trees, it's not the total reason. Obviously it does protect the riders, but the club, Aberdare Motorcycle Club, has to also protect the trees, and this is another reason for some of the straw bales in places that you might not think they're needed. Right. We're now going to try and walk the circuit, vans allowing, on the racing line. Now the natural racing line coming through here is on the inside, but this is a favourite overtaking spot for a lot of riders, and as I found out to my cost, you can't always take what you would consider the natural racing line into the right-hander in a moment. It's sometimes well worth moving over to the right-hand side of the circuit as it's viewed at the moment, because you'll find people trying to cut up the inside of you on this corner, and being a relatively slow corner, it's probably one where you would lose the least through blocking other riders. It takes a brave man to go round the outside of you here, so I tend to hang to the right hand side of the circuit, just where the little girl in the pink is heading now. But we're going to look at the bend now. This is one that the spectators watch from the bandstand. Many a rider's been through the trees here, and we're getting ready to peel into the corner. You have to watch out, as I found to my cost at this one, under the trees. If there's been some damp weather and it's drying, is one place that you will find damp patches, and very easy to lock your wheel going into this corner, as I discovered, and by the time you've corrected it, you're heading towards that rather firm looking tree on the left hand side of the circuit. Fortunately it is a slow corner, and the only mishap I had, I'd almost stopped before I got onto the grass verge. And we're now heading through the corner down to where we first started the video. You can see the duck pond more clearly at this point. Also, one or two riders are noted on the racing line. If they've gone wide at this point, there is a drain cover. It's worthwhile trying to miss that, particularly on a 50cc bike. and the person in front is just passing that drain cover now. There are also several more. If you've drifted out that wide on this corner, you're probably going to be on the wrong line to go through into the blind bend and round the back of the cafe. That finishes the walk around the circuit. I hope it's been of some use. I'm sorry that you've had to put up with me doing it, but no other riders seem to be willing to walk around in the wet. All the best to everyone. Bye.